hi, Nathaniel. It's
Dang.
great to see you on here. We wanted to kind of get together, and I had some questions for you because I am absolutely convinced that a lot of my clients, big and small, would be very interested in what you do. So they all book travel. They all have people that come from overseas to come here for like sales kickoffs and important meetings or exhibitions. They're sponsoring events, all that sort of thing. And they all take their teams overseas as well. So they take their teams on, all sorts of places for more events, team building trips and whatnot. You probably know more about that than I even do. So thank you for coming on today to talk to me
No,
and
thank you. I
and
appreciate
sharing
it.
your knowledge. So tell me a little bit just about you first of all, and Travel Musters.
Yeah, great question. So, look, I mean, Traveltrust, we are a travel management company. So it's interesting that you mentioned like large and small. We kind of fit in the middle in that space. Like, there's obviously a couple of enterprise level players in our space, but we're probably more suited to sub SME, some enterprise and SME type clients where they get SME type pricing, but they have global reach with our offices outside of Australia and around the world. It's interesting that you mentioned meetings and events. Obviously, I know that you work really heavily in that space, and it's something that's really picked up in the last, year or two, where meeting and events, conferences have really kind of come back to the fore, and I feel like everyone's really excited to get out and like be face to face with people and have those conversations, read a bit about different things. Me myself, like I have been with Travel Trust for a little while now. Have a past life where I played professional basketball, and it's kind of hard to tell on video, but I'm 6'10". I don't know if my the size of my head really gives it away, but yeah, seeing me in person, like I'm a little bit hard to miss. But yeah, look, I've been really enjoying working for Travel Trust. I think that we have a really interesting value proposition in the market. And yeah, just talking to clients, potential and current, and yeah, it's a really interesting space to work. I think travel is one of those things where it's both, really exciting, getting around and seeing different people, seeing different places, getting out, but then also really boring. It's kind of the dichotomy where like you have to book and you have to plan, and there's like, duty of care that goes into different things and taking care of people. And that's kind of the part where Travel Trust fit in, where, we book and plan, and we work with our clients to try and find cost efficiencies and taking care of them when things go wrong, which inevitably they do. If you travel enough, you'll get cancelled or delayed or pushed and pulled. And yeah, that's kind of where we come in. It's just like taking a little bit of the headache out of travel and reducing the costs, and just a bit of clarity overall in terms of what you're spending, how you're spending it, and if there's any efficiencies along the way that we can help with.
Great. And as you said, it's usually when things go wrong. And, I think everyone's got a travel story of something, expecting flight or whatever, double booked a hotel and so on and so forth. So, yeah, wonderful. Definitely that's when they would reach out for you. And apologies, just actually, instead of saying Travel Trust, I said Travel Musters.
Oh,
I
that's
took
all
your
right.
surname and put it together.
No stress.
Here we go. So I have these questions for you. Okay, so what sort of travel are you seeing most of right now? Is it conferences? Is it team trips? Is it client visits? Like any of these things we're speaking about? What are you sort of seeing? What are trends?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, obviously, you mentioned conferences and events. I think that that's a space that's really picking up. I think offsites, like companies that want to get together, especially for teams that work remotely, like they might to get together once or twice a year and do a big planning day or two or a couple of days together where they work on team dynamics. And then I think that client visits have been a really interesting one. I feel like if you are, a high level executive C-suite, or just sub C-suite, like plus one or plus two, those meetings are still happening and they're still really important. I feel like the experience of meeting someone face to face never really goes away, but I feel like the middle manager level travel has kind of mostly been taken over by what we're doing today, which is just, teams and things like that. But we've really seen that executive level and conference level and offsites, like that sort of thing, kind of pick up the slack, to the point that business travel, I think, is back to what it was like pre-COVID levels and some. So it's kind of really taken off. And yeah, those kind of spaces, conference, client, and also a little bit of leisure as well. Some companies are allowing people to stay a little bit longer on either side of their trips and kind of combine some things, especially going overseas. But there's obviously some things to watch out for when you do that as an organization as well, which we could potentially talk about too.
Yep. Okay. I think I've got a question like that on my list. Absolutely. I totally agree. Pre-COVID, like we're at that place where we were, and beyond, where as COVID was taking off, I think a lot of business all over Australia was just going gangbusters, and then COVID hit, and I feel like we're back at that place, and then we've gone from there, because pretty much anyone I speak to is flat out. So anyway, so a good problem to have. Have you noticed any cities becoming surprisingly popular for business events?
Yeah, I think like there've been, I feel as though we're organizing, working with a partner that is planning the World Fair in Osaka this year, and I feel like Japan has been a really popular space. Like there's different places in Japan. I mean, it's also a really popular holiday destinations for Australians at the moment as well. I think that there's spaces across Southeast Asia that have kind of picked up a little bit. I feel like people are going more and more to India as well. There's a couple of different cities there that have been really popular just for business in general. And I feel like the Middle East, obviously, there's been a real emphasis for them in terms of growth and events and trying to pull people in to kind of visit the country and every which way that possible, whether that's like events or leisure travel or what have you. But yeah, I mean, obviously the old stalwarts of like London, New York, like I don't feel like they'll ever really go away, but I do feel like there's been a real emphasis on Southeast Asia and the Middle East over the last 6 to 12 months as well.
Yeah. Okay. And why do you think that is? Is it cost? Is it just a trend of popularity?
Yeah, I think part of it is down to cost. Like it's a little bit closer. They're a little bit closer. But the other piece to that is that I think that they're relative. Most of those countries are relatively safe to visit, not super cost heavy, and a bit of a meeting place. Like especially the Middle East, obviously, like it's between us and Europe, so people can kind of conglomerate there a little bit more easily without, especially coming from Australia, you have to kind of take 2 flights to get really anywhere and travel 15 plus hours. So it's nice to be able to cut that down a little bit and not have to be on a plane forever.
Nice. Okay, great. What's one travel tip that you reckon more people need to know?
That's a good one. I feel like I have my own, just being a tall person getting on planes. For me, it's always like I used to always like be the last person on the plane and try and nab like an upgrade for myself that if no one was going to check my ticket, I'd just sit in a nicer seat or a free row. I feel like I mean, literally everyone talks about booking ahead of time. I think that the one thing, especially in 2025, and I was listening to a webinar maybe a couple of weeks back with one of our partners, World Travel Protection, and they were talking about booking, like printing off your itinerary, like everything basically that you needed to make sure that they were talking specifically about travel to the US and being able to like switch your phone off and have a bit of security from that end. And I think that, having your itinerary, everything kind of printed out and really taken care of means that, if you have any issues from the technical side of things, you're not going to get stuck. I know we've had some clients that, they have their visa on their phone and then for some reason their phone decides to update whilst they're getting off the plane or getting into a new country, and it kind of can put you in a bit of a pickle. So I feel like especially for business travel, it's important to have everything kind of laid out quite nicely so that you can transition pretty smoothly through wherever you're traveling to. It sounds really old school, but it always works.
Price for some reason it's not charged probably. Yep, great.
Yeah.
What about any certain days to book? Is there a day in particular in the week that might be a good day to book, or it doesn't really matter?
Yeah, I think, well, generally speaking, Tuesdays are the cheapest day to book, and I don't know why that is. I feel like it has to do with just traffic on websites and airlines releasing their tickets. I know that airlines release their tickets generally about 9 months before travel, and generally like that 2 to 3 months window is probably the sweet spot to book out from a trip. But generally speaking, like the big price hikes, especially for international travel, is from about the 2 week mark prior to the airfare. And for domestic, it's about 1 week. So that's when you really start to see like prices really tick up. So if you can get people to book before, at least 2 weeks before for international and 1 week before for domestic, especially for business. Again, I appreciate that it's hard to plan a business trip 6 months out. Most of the time they're kind of ad hoc, but yeah, at least that 2 week, 1 week rule is fairly good, at least in terms of cost savings. Yeah.
Okay, great. Perfect. Thank you. Noting all of this. Are there any small tweaks that companies can make to save money without compromising the experience?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously booking ahead of time is one thing.
Mhm.
I think again, like depending on the size of travel, like again, working with a travel management company, like we can reach out to airlines on your behalf. I think that, the other piece that we would like to talk to our clients about is setting up business reward accounts. So some of our clients won't necessarily have like obviously if you'll have your own personal frequent flyer, but it's at least in Australia, you could set up like a Qantas Business Rewards and Virgin Frequent Flyer for your company as well. So you can kind of accrue those points side by side. And then you can use those to apply for other trips and upgrades and that sort of thing. And again, that's literally just kind of free money that's sitting there. And a lot of our clients, we have to kind of walk them through the process to get set up on that as well. I guess the other piece is just, I guess, managing your spend and understanding how and where you're spending. So I think, again, with a lot of our clients, a lot of that conversation is around consolidating spend with one supplier and then negotiating with them on price. So whether that be like a set room amount for a night at a hotel within Brisbane or Melbourne or what have you, and kind of working with them through that, or whether it's with an airline and talking to them about, across the board savings on airfares or what they can do for you, that sort of thing, if you take your spend to them.
Mhm.
Both of those kind of work as well quite nicely too.
Okay,
Preferred supplier relationships effectively, yeah.
great. Okay, amazing. So, what do most people forget to factor in when booking group travel for a big event?
I think that the one that stands out to me is, especially depending on the size of the event and the number of people traveling, is just room allocations and the amount of rooms in a certain space. So at some point in time, as especially depending on where the event is, and especially relevant for smaller cities and places like that, eventually you kind of just run out of hotel rooms, especially for bigger events.
Oh, and everyone's
If you're
urging on an area.
Everyone's, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And again, like hotels realize that and they can kind of charge a pretty penny for the last room
Mhm.
allocations. But also you might potentially have to stay further away or stay at a more expensive hotel. So I
Mhm.
think like just making sure that you kind of get your room blocks in early and get a hold on those rooms, even if they're not necessarily paid for, but you have them held early. That can be really important. The other piece is just airport transfers. So like if you're moving a big group around, how do you get a group of 10, 20, 30 people from A to B? Like, do you have to book a bus? Are you all going to take separate taxis? What's the most cost effective way to move people around? Do you want to wait everybody in the airport until everyone gets there if they're all coming from different locations? How do you make sure they all fly in roughly at the same time? Like there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, which can get really finicky. Yeah.
Like a nightmare, logistical nightmare. My goodness. Oh my God. Yeah, you're probably worth way more money, I'd say.
Yeah,
Like
it's tough.
herding cats. Okay, amazing. How do you make travel feel less chaotic for executives or frequent travelers? Is there a
Yeah,
way to do that?
yeah, I think look, I think just being on the ball, kind of being responsive and making sure that everything is covered pre-trip. So, that might be, someone has a question and coming back to them in a timely manner and making sure that their itinerary is laid out in a way that's, easy to read. I know that speaking to some of our clients, like they might work with another provider and they just tell me about how their inbox is flooded with emails from them and they're kind of trying to pick out which one that has their itinerary, where the information is that they need. So making sure that that's all in one place.
Okay.
But I think also the other piece is just like we build out a bit of a traveler profile before people work with us. So that's, people have had weird and wonderful requests around like, the obvious ones are like seats and meals and, but we've even had ones where people are like, I won't fly on a specific type of plane or like really, really granular things.
Okay.
I need to sit next to this person. Things like that where it's important for us to be able to have all that information on hand so that when we're kind of booking those trips, we know all of that.
Mhm.
But yeah, the other piece is just having that 24/7 support. So being available at any point in time to pick something up and run with it and not having people feel like they have to wait till you come back in the office at 9 a.m. to be able to answer their email, especially if things are held up, if they're stuck somewhere and they get a cancellation. Yeah, there's a bit that goes into that.
Are you working round the clock with getting emails or messages or what have you through the night with your clients traveling?
Yeah, so we're lucky where we're supported our Australian team. We have teams in the UK and Canada and the US, so we kind of have a bit of a web of a follow the sun model where we can support our clients kind of across those offices.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think look, it's not necessarily me at 2 o'clock in the morning who's answering our emails, but it is somebody in house who works with Travel Trust, and I know our clients really like that. Also because there's kind of a little bit of personal touch. You're not talking to someone from a call center or some other organization. You're talking to someone who knows who you are and what you need, and we don't need a case number to understand what's
Nice.
going on. But you can kind of just talk to us and just
Oh,
talk to the phone, like we're kind of an extension of your team almost.
beautiful. And when you're in that moment and stuff's happening, that's when you need it the most, and you want to feel that
Yeah.
security.
Yeah, you don't want to have to like try and look up your client number on your email address and then the right number. You just want to call someone and have them figure it out. Yeah.
Yep. You're cranky.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Okay. So what are some of the weirdest or quirky stories, any funny stories or anything that you've travel requests that you've had to deal with? Is there anything that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, look, from what I obviously, like I mentioned before, like the plane one is always one that really stands out to me. I mean, I feel like people have such a lot, like people are just really finicky about how they travel, and fair enough. Like you're sitting in the same seat for sometimes 24 hours, and understanding what like making sure that you're comfortable during that time, especially for a business trip, is really important because if you're traveling for leisure and you get there and you're a bit tired and you take a big nap, like it's not necessarily a big deal. If jet lag hits you for a couple of days, you're like whatever, you kind of just roll with the punches. But if you're there for business, like it's a bit different. You have to be sharp, you have to be on the ball. Things are happening and moving, and yeah, like I think that there's it's a little bit different. I can't think of the airplane one is always one that sticks in my mind, but I know I've mentioned that already. But I just can't believe that like you would pick a certain airline or airplane not to fly on. I know that we like have had to be accommodating where book them on one plane and then something gets cancelled, moved around, they get put on the plane that they're not allowed to fly on or don't want to fly on, and we have to move their flight. Like, yeah, it can get really finicky, but that's all part of the game. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And how early is early enough to start planning travel for a big event or a team trip?
Yeah, I think big events and team trips are always interesting. I think again for like smaller groups or just like individual travelers, like 2 weeks for international, 1 week for domestic at the very least. But for big like events and team trips, I think you probably at least want 3+ months
Okay.
because there's a lot that goes into that. Like there
Mhm.
is obviously how people are getting there. Like we work with a provider in events that is moving a whole like I think we're doing a booking for close or around 100 people for later this year, and they're all flying from different places to the same location, and there's a lot of planning that goes into that around like how do all these people want to fly, who do they want to fly with, what class do they all fly, how are we going to get them all to there at the same time, how are we going to transfer them all to the hotel, how are we going to get a room block in a hotel for 100 different people. Like there's a lot that goes into the logistics part of that. And I guess that's part of the value add that we have when we kind of just take some of those pain points away. I know like a lot of it is tracking a lot of different things on spreadsheets and systems and having it all written down somewhere because you need to keep track of it all.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think ideally like 3+ months for a bigger trip, I would say. Yeah.
Great. And are people still combining, I'd imagine they are, business with pleasure?
Yeah, so that's yeah, I think like that was a really big like buzzword in our industry probably 12-ish months ago.
Okay.
There's a lot that kind of went into that. But I think it is still something that is out there. And, I think that it's one of those things where as an employee, especially when you're traveling somewhere like London or New York or somewhere iconic where you're like, I would really love to stay here for a bit longer. It's nice that you can. There's obviously like some considerations on the employer side around like taxes and like duty of care and costs and things like that we kind of work with our clients when we go through. I know that we have a booking system that allows clients to kind of split those costs off, but generally speaking, like there's a lot that goes into that. And I think that it is something where employees do want it, especially, if you can take someone with you and they pay for their own airfare, but you travel with a partner, you stay a couple of days extra and make a bit of a trip out of it. But there's obviously a lot of considerations from the employer side that need to be taken into account as well.
Okay. Well, it sounds like companies are being more flexible for to allow for that as well.
Yeah,
Mm.
definitely.
Well, what's one thing that you wish that every traveller or travel booker or executive assistant who's booking the travel knew? Or is there something that you wish they knew?
Yeah, good question. I think, well, from our perspective, it's probably just that I guess that I wish that they knew the information that we needed just to make a booking. I think that there is, I mean, again, people are like, hey, I want to go to Melbourne on this date. And it's like, okay, well, maybe if you just let me know like the airline that you might like to fly, the class that you might like to fly. Like there's a lot, generally speaking, like people kind of give you the dates and the place, but there's a lot more information that we kind of need to round out and make sure that the itinerary that we're putting together is really relevant for you. The same thing for like hotels. Like people are like, oh, I want a hotel near this place that we're going to. And it's like, well, yeah, but like how much would you like to spend on a hotel? Like give us a rough guide so that we can kind of have something to work off, or maybe there's something that you specific that you really want. Um, and I think the other part is just I guess the amount of work that goes into dealing with the airlines. Like they're obviously working with massive volumes, and everyone else kind of feels that on their end when you have to call an airline and try and figure out what's going on with your flight or what have you. Generally, the wait times are fairly expansive, but I guess for us, like we can hold seats and do some like things on our back end that allow us to kind of circumnavigate those systems and make life a little bit easier for the people that we work with.
Right. And I guess like say one of the things might be like a direct flight. Somebody might have to take something that's not a direct flight. You know, are these, I guess these are all things that you can, incorporate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. And I think again, like, looking at different options around how people get from A to B, like there's, traveling directly or going indirect, like where people might like to fly through, how it is flying through those countries. Like some countries have different visa requirements around the way that you fly there. And we kind of have a bit of a vast knowledge in that space and work with some partners that support us for some of our more in-depth cases as well. But yeah, there's a fair bit of planning that goes into it's crazy. Like I feel like when you jump online and you just go Skyscanner or what have you, and you do click and you make a booking, it seems easy. But I think when something goes wrong or you need someone to support with a change or something, you get hung up on an airline, you're waiting forever. That's where our value like really comes in. Or if someone gets stuck overseas and you need to bring them home and you want to know where your employees are at any given point in time, because there's that duty of care piece that every employer has when they send their employees somewhere else.
On that note, is there anything that people overlook when they're sending their staff overseas?
I think that there's a couple of different things. I think like the one is probably the one that really comes to my mind. The two things are probably travel insurance. Like I think that's something that people leave to the last minute generally. And again, like whether your company policy already has travel insurance built in, whether you have to get a separate policy. I know that I myself have been guilty of that, so I can't exclude myself from the quorum in that. But I think the other piece is just visa lead times and requirements. So like there's a bunch, especially for certain countries and depending on what passport you hold, there's a lot of information that kind of goes into planning that piece. And generally it's like 2 weeks before the trip where people are like, oh crap, I need a visa to go to this country and I don't have one. And what's the processing time? Do I have to move my trip? That is obviously really important. But I think the one really fine point is probably like just working around jet lag for meetings. And I think like people fly in at 6 a.m. on a morning to have a meeting at 10 a.m. and they don't think about the fact that they are only flying economy or premium and they won't be able to sleep on the flight. And it might be 6 a.m. there, but it's 12 p.m. here. And so your meeting is at 4 a.m. Australian time, and trying to plan around that piece as well and working with a partner that can kind of be like, yeah, maybe it's better if you take this flight and you kind of do work around things this way, and this is cost effective, but this also makes sense for the meeting that you're planning to have. Because again, like you want that cost to make sense. You want an ROI on the travel that you're having. And again, like the person that you're sending there is the greatest example of what that ROI is and what is kind of bringing that to fruition and making sure that you're empowering that employee or person to have the best time and be able to represent the organization in the best way possible is also really important and kind of a bit overlooked, to be honest with you.
No, a very, very valid point. Is there any tips that you have on how to overcome jet lag when you get to see another country? You know, well, if I've got to go into a high power meeting and I want to be like, bing.
I mean,
What do you think?
my classic one is just like the old school route. Like I think that for me, I always try and stay up late the night before travel to make sure that I'm tired enough to sleep on the plane.
Okay.
And then the other piece is just like being outside in sunlight. I feel like the classic, like it's so old school, but it never fails, which is, if you need to be awake and you need to make sure, like coffee is always there, but I think, making sure that you are actually experiencing some of the daytime and some of the sunlight, because it's very easy to get into your hotel at 6 a.m. and be like, oh, I have a 10 a.m. meeting. I'll just take a quick nap. I'll be fine. Like it'll be 20 minutes. And then it's like 2 hours later, you wake up, you don't know where you are. You have to try and pull yourself together, and it's all kind of all over Red Rover. Whereas it's a bit easier. It's better to just push through, I think, and kind of make sure that you get yourself out and you feel a bit of the fresh air and the sunlight on your eyes, and just make sure that you're a bit more awake for things once you get to them.
Oh, that's great. That makes perfect sense to me, because I know all about the circadian rhythms when you're looking at sunlight, and I try and get sunrise, rays into my eyes in the morning. So for that exact reason. So
do you get out and just you kind of stare at the sun for a little while in the morning? Is that how?
At the sunrise, I do, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Wow.
Minutes, because it's a little bit more gentle, but apparently it resets all the circadian rhythms, helps you sleep, so you have more energy in the day. So you'll sleep better.
Yeah. Well, that's gonna be my takeaway. Something to learn. There you go.
And so why would someone bother, this is my last question, booking a travel company like you instead of booking themselves?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think, I feel like I would say this openly to, some of the clients or potential clients that approach us. I think that it's a lot of it comes down to time saving. So again, like, if you're going back and forth around planning, trying to figure out the best time to get to a place, how your kind of trip lays out, especially if there's a lot of stops and complex hotels and transfers and that sort of thing, that time saving piece can be really effective for organizations, just kind of outsourcing that an extension of your team who's an expert in that space. Here are the details, you kind of know us and what we like to book, figure it out. But I think the other piece about that is the backup on when things go wrong. So, someone gets stuck somewhere, you have an EA or PA or office manager who kind of has to pick up the slack at 3 o'clock in the morning. They're trying to get on a hold of the phone with Qantas and figure out what's happening. We're always there. We're always available. And kind of having that piece and that duty of care and that peace of mind to know that your travelers are supported is really important. And I think that the last piece is just understanding of what your travel looks like. Like travel is, generally speaking, for most organizations, it's their third biggest controllable expense. And so being able to look at travel and be like, okay, this is where we spend our travel. This is who we spend it with. This is who we're flying with, staying with, driving with. These are the people and what they're spending, and how can we make that more efficient? So like understanding which cost centers are spending the most on travel. It's a bit easier to derive ROI once you have a bit of an understanding. And I think, a lot of clients that I speak with are kind of like, well, everyone expenses their own travel individually, and our finance department kind of tries to string together the pieces to understand, but we don't really know how much we spend on travel. And the same thing with like, it's kind of coming to the fore at the moment, which is like carbon tracking and carbon credits, and being able to track that side of things for organizations is becoming more and more important. And I think that's also really important. But at the end of the day, we're a service-based business, and there's a nicety to be able to just know that things are sorted, and a real peace of mind for that piece, and to be able to have things sorted without 1,000 emails flying around for different people trying to figure out who's going what and what's happening where, is definitely worth a little bit. At least that's what our business model is based on. So there's clearly some worth there. And I think that's also the joy of it all, which is, being able to support people as they move around and watch businesses grow as you kind of partner with them is really, really exciting. And especially in the space that we work in, that sub-enterprise SME or regional enterprise space. There's a lot of real fast-paced and fast-moving and exciting organizations, and it's a joy to be able to support them as they kind of move and grow.
Beautiful. And your name says it all, Traveltrust. I mean, travel.
Yeah, it's kind of in the name. Yeah.
Love it. Nathaniel, thank you so very much. I know these tips are going to be so helpful to people. I'm sure many of my clients and colleagues will take a lot from this. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you again at another networking event. Thanks for coming.
I feel like we bump into each other like every second networking event that you're at, which I love about you. I